Some stats from HESO, it's a higher education statistics people, that between 2011 and 17, there was a 31% increase in neurodiverse graduates. And I used to work as a disability advisor in a university, and you could get funding to get people diagnosed with conditions. So people would have gone through their whole education system, struggling or coming up with different ways around things. And actually, at university, fortunately, excuse me, we had the budget to provide people with funding for this, whereas schools don't necessarily have that. So I like to raise this as a point that I think if you work in recruitment, HR, you manage people, or you have colleagues, I think you're going to be seeing a lot more people coming through being open about having a neurodivergent condition. I think 15% of your workforce could be neurodivergent. If we talk about the stats that we're going to talk about in a minute as we go through, I've sort of amalgamated that. I don't think there's any one particular official stat out there at the moment because neurodiversity is so wide. But looking at the stats that we have already, I would estimate conservatively that 15% of your workforce could be neurodiverse in some way. So if you think about the size of some of your workforces and you do the maths around that, that's quite a lot of people. Despite this, only 10% of HR professionals consider neurodiversity in their people management practices. So this was a study from the CIPD last year. So in one way, I think this is good for you to see because you might have seen a lot about neurodiversity in the media and you might think all workplaces are doing loads and loads about it. I would say we're really at the beginning of the journey, and 10% is only going to go higher, isn't it, as we go through. And I don't think that even accounts some of the training that has happened since then. So I think that's really important to recognise. And when this study came out, I've done some work with the CIPD to help them embed neurodiversity in their people management practices, which I really enjoyed. So I'm going to go into a bit more about each condition that we focus on at Adjust, but I think it's important to recognise that there's such an overlapping nature of neurodiversity, and especially from my experience of people I've worked with, it's very hard just to say that I find it very hard sometimes to just say someone's in one box or one label when they've seen such an overlap in my career, just anecdotally. And so many people I've seen diagnosed with one neurodiverse condition and actually not diagnosed with another when it's quite obvious to me. So I've seen such an overlap, and all this brings me back to is focus on the individual again. So at the moment it's estimated, so I'm going to go through each condition as quick as I can. I could talk about this all week, so I'm really trying to get it concise for you. But it's estimated about 10% of the population have dyslexia, and it's estimated that about half of those people are diagnosed in higher education. So it's just interesting stats. I've got a Guess Who, just to try and illustrate symbolically how I think about some of these conditions. So which person with dyslexia said, at school I struggled, I didn't understand it then, but I was and still am severely dyslexic. I knew I was smart, but nobody else could see it. It's been my different way of thinking that has been the key to my success. And the clue is a fragrant entrepreneur. Feel free just to shout out the answer. Joe Malone. So Richard Branson does have dyslexia and he might smell really nice. But this one was Joe Malone, who makes perfumed goods. But what I love about expensive candles, what I love about Joe Malone is I think it sums up how we're talking about dyslexia and neurodiversity. Yes, she struggled at school, but she always knew that she was clever. And what does clever even mean? You know, when we're at school, we're being assessed through exams often. And I don't think, sorry to school bash, I'm school bashing all the time, but I don't think schools really encourage entrepreneurial thinking. I saw a thing the other day that was saying about how you could get detention in school, and one of them was asking the question, why? And that can be seen as rebellious. And I often think that in schools, and for a lot of neurodiverse people who like to see the bigger picture, and just to like to know why, I think it's outrageous that there's detentions being given out for that. But I also saw it was only 2 hours detention for forging your parents' signature, so I might have done that, because 2 hours isn't too bad.